Hi, good afternoon. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Erica Cornier and I serve as the Vice President of Government and Corporate Relations at Indotronix International Corporation. On behalf of Indotronix, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar, Veteran Hiring in the Contingent Workforce. I'd like to start by expressing our sincere gratitude to the veterans that are joining us today. For those who may not be familiar with Indotronix, our mission is connecting clients with talent. We specialize in contingent staffing in IT, engineering, professional, and light industrial skills across a wide range of industries such as aerospace, financial services, and life sciences. Our global workforce is over 1,200, and 9% of our contingent staff are veterans, which is slightly higher than the national average. A couple of housekeeping items. All participants are on mute. However, we still love your participation. Please use the question box on the panel to ask panelists any questions you might have. At the end of the discussion, we'll have a Q&A session and the panelists will be able to answer your questions then. Please type your questions in the question box and not in the chat box. Please use the chat box for any messages you have for the organizers. We will have 3 polling questions during the webinar. We ask that you please participate. We will share the results of the polls with the panelists and then with all of you. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, my colleague, Kyle Laulo, Director of Client Services and Veteran Affairs at Indotronix. Kyle manages our veteran hiring program, and he is also a military spouse with a passion for veterans assistance. With that, over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you to everyone who has joined. We've been using the hashtag Indotronix for Vets for all of our social media posting and marketing for this webinar. If anyone's planning on posting about the event, we welcome you to use that hashtag. We'd appreciate that. So let's get started. According to the American Staffing Association, U.S. companies employ over 16 million contingent workers annually, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that veterans represent 8 to 9% of the total workforce. Veteran hiring is a high priority to most companies, whether they are a large corporation, a staffing company, or a managed service program with provider. Most of these entities have a documented veteran hiring formal objectives and goals. While many staffing companies maintain robust veteran hiring programs, it is not common for corporations to account for veteran workers in their contingent workforce. There's a variety of reasons engaged to this. For example, traditionally, corporations engage staffing companies that are minority-owned, veteran-owned, or diverse-owned companies as a way to achieve minority spend with that corporation. However, that's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about staffing companies hiring veterans and placing them at their end customers. Another reason is the simple fact that contingent workers are not employees of the corporations, and corporations often want to avoid co-employment risk. And finally, MSPs staffing companies may not share their veteran hiring data with their end customers. So as these things go, there's often a line drawn in the sand that separates a company from its contingent workforce. The fact is, though, staffing companies work hard to offer a diverse workforce to their end customers, including but to robust veteran headcount. So I pointed out reasons why this isn't happening. Today, we're going to explore the challenges and opportunities of how corporations, MSPs, and staffing companies can partner to recognize the diversity within their contingent workforce. Because at the end of the day, we're all here to elevate and recognize our veteran hiring efforts. So we have a strong panel for you today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. First, we have John Perez, Head of Military and Veteran Affairs at Johnson & Johnson. John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Kyle, and thank you for having me and allowing Johnson & Johnson to join this. So John Perez, Head for Military and Veterans Affairs. I'm a former Army officer, a little bit of time on active duty as well as some reserve time. I've been at Johnson & Johnson for about 9 years. I've had a variety of different roles. My current role is Head for Military Veterans Affairs. It's really end-to-end, everything that touches the military space, in particular with heavy focus on how we recruit the veteran population. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Next, we have Rachel Harrington, Program Director at NextSource. Rachel?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Rachel Harrington. I am the Program Director at NextSource. Been with NextSource for about 2 years. NextSource is a certified women-owned MSP. I have about 20 plus years in the contingent staffing industry, 15 plus of those working with MSPs and VMS.
Thanks, Rachel. Next, we have Adam Moore, Director of Supplier Diversity at Truist.
Hey, thanks for having
Adam?
me. Yep, thank you so much for having me. Adam Moore, Director of Supplier Diversity at the newly formed Truist Bank, which is the merger of the SunTrust and BB&T brands here in the Southeast. Help lead a team of other supplier diversity professionals as we reach back, promote, and bring diverse firms into our supplier ecosystem here at the bank. My specialty is in contingent labor, and I work directly with our VMO in deciding who we bring on board in the way of labor providers, MSPs, and our VMS.
Thanks, Adam. I think my audio is not good. I'm going to try to stop presenting the screen. Maybe that'll help. Am I coming across not breaking up? Okay. All right, so let's get moving. Sorry for the technical difficulty here. We'll have to survive without a slideshow. So we have, we're going to go over our agenda today. First, we're going to cover corporations recognizing and accounting for veteran headcount within their contingent labor workforce. Then we'll talk about veteran hiring programs within staffing companies. And our final topic will be the role of MSPs accounting for veteran hiring within their supplier base. We will introduce each topic with an audience polling question, and you'll be able to respond to each question in the GoToWebinar tool. I'll then display the polling results for everyone to see. At the end of the webinar, as Erica mentioned, we will have audience questions, and I will read those from whatever is entered in the GoToWebinar tool. So with that, let's open up our first polling question. The question is, do you account for veterans in your contingent workforce? Yes, no, or it's in planning. Go ahead and answer, and I'll wait a little bit, and then I'll close the poll and we'll display the results. All right. So there's the results. Looks like the majority do account for it. All right. So our first topic is corporations recognizing and accounting for veterans in their contingent workforce. And what we'll do here is just lay a foundation for our panelists to describe their veteran hiring program, or whether they do or do not account for veterans in their contingent workforce. So John Perez, could you kick us off with this one?
Sure. So Johnson & Johnson is the world's largest and most broadly based healthcare company. So we're pharmaceutical, medical device, and consumer healthcare products. We touch more than 1 billion people a day. I'm sure most people in their cabinet probably have Band-Aids or Tylenol or Motrin or Aveeno or Neutrogena. We're proud to be a leader in support and engagement with the military connected community, and that comes back and into the recruiting portion as well. So how do we do that? We really have a comprehensive program. I'll speak to that for a second, then speak to the contingent labor part at the end. It starts internally. So being able to share with hiring managers and the broader organization on the business case for hiring veterans. It's a great business case to share that veterans tend to be more likely to be retained longer than non-veterans and outperform non-veterans holding other factors constant. So starting with that as a baseline is a great one to build the internal demand. Externally, what are the programs there? It starts with just the general business case to join J&J, right? It should be an attractive company. The same would be for any individual as they're making the consideration of where to go join, and doing some specialized things to highlight, hey, we understand, support, and value the unique differences coming from the veteran community or the broader military community is really important. A good example of that might be differentiating benefits for individuals who are part-time military, those National Guard or Reserve service members. So it starts with general attractiveness, and then it dives into more specialized programming, things like working with certain partners to attract talent. Organizations like Hiring Our Heroes or Heroes Make America. MedTech Veterans is another great one, very specific to the life sciences industry that we work with. From there, from partnerships, I would say it's events, activities, conferences, things like that, meeting the community where they are. So going to those specialized transitioning service member events, whether it's on a military installation or separately. And then the third thing that I would share just a little bit about is some differentiating programming and internal hiring channels. So for J&J and for a lot of organizations, that may be something like the Department of Defense Skill Bridge program, which is really focused on those individuals who are transitioning from active duty to full-time employment. Another great example and specific and unique to J&J is our Military Veterans Leadership Development Program. That's an accelerated development program targeted at really high potential recently transitioning service members. Again, it's all back to really creating a comprehensive program to meet all the different types of veterans and giving them different channels to join the company. On the contingent workforce side, I would say it's not something we actively think about and plan, as Kyle, as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, right? The contingent workers are not full-time employees. So is it important to us that our managed service provider, in this case, is engaged with veteran-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, and others? Certainly. Is it important that they're bringing a diverse workforce? Yes, but there's definitely that differentiation between what we're doing to attract employees versus and candidates for employment is different than how we approach our managed service provider.
Got it. Thank you, John. That's awesome. Let's have Adam continue.
Yeah, and for Truist, we're not going to venture too far afield from the way J&J is doing it also. We have a very active BRG, or business resource group, that is centered around veterans, both the hiring of veterans and the supporting of veterans that we already have internally. And so we do actively recruit. We have our recruiting teams do go to bases, and we do have recruiting fairs. We do find veterans to be a very quality teammate to come into the bank, and so therefore we do pursue them after they decide to make the change to come out of the military and into the private sector. As far as with our contingent labor program, I mean, that's not something we ask for them to do or require them to provide to us, but we do like seeing that they have some sort of ability to attract, retain, and hire. military talent as they too are transitioning out of the military and into the private sector. And I think it's something that we will be continuing to monitor, if not in a stricter fashion as time kind of goes on. But it is definitely, like I said, we're right there with J&J in that it's a core part of our hiring practice, and something we do like to see our labor providers also engaging in.
Great, and
thanks so much, Adam. Rachel, your business is a little.
Yep.
So, go ahead.
Speaking from the MSP point of view, so it's just very important for the MSP to understand the customer needs. So to be collaborative, be strategic, always, having their goals in mind. So whether it is tracking the contingent in their diversity numbers, or just really ensuring that they have those best-in-class supplier partners who, share a similar corporate culture and are doing, what they should be doing as far as attracting diverse talent, qualified diverse talent. Because, we all know that, diverse candidate or not, we really want these, the best candidate on the contingent side is going to be that most qualified candidate that can hit the ground running. Obviously, the more you increase your diverse candidate pool, the more you can introduce diverse candidates to the hiring. So I think it's really just understanding what our clients want, what the needs are, how they are tracking contingent resources, and making sure we are aligning those best partners to our customers.
Got it. Thank you, Rachel. All right, so let's move on to our next polling question. I'm going to launch it since you can't see me or see my deck anymore. So the question is, how would you rate your veteran hiring program? Options are great, we're rock stars, good, we have a program, we'd like to do better. We track hires, but mostly for compliance, and then now we don't even have a program. We're collecting responses here. Keep voting, please. Good job. All right, I'm going to share this. So the results are good. That's a fair answer. That's what I would say as well. Okay, so our next topic is veteran hiring programs within staffing companies. So even without trying, all staffing companies hire veterans. There's thousands of veteran candidates out there, and staffing companies hire them every day. But many companies, staffing companies such as Indotronix, like we have a robust veteran hiring program. We actively pursue veteran candidates, and we have veteran hiring goals, and we make an effort, to take care of them once they're employees. So the question to the panel is, what role do you see for your staffing suppliers as it relates to your veteran hiring program goals? And I know Adam and John don't necessarily do this now, but this is a niche topic, and we're forward-looking here. So let's start with Rachel and continue on with John and Adam.
Sure. So as a vendor neutral MSP, we do not do any staffing ourselves. So our staffing suppliers are key. They're key to providing those diverse candidates, to having robust, diverse recruiting programs. They're key in understanding, how to recruit those candidates, how to source those candidates, how to employ and maintain them. So definitely key. And whether or not it is, meeting a NextSource goal, an MSP goal, or a customer goal, again, we do want all of our suppliers, to come, with a diverse recruiting program. And, they're not all veteran, again, it is what is near and dear to them. When we are coaching them, I always recommend that, the supplier picks something that is meaningful to them, that they understand, so they know how to target it and where they should be looking for that. So I think it's also really important for a customer, a supplier to understand their culture and what they want, and not just try and mold into what a customer needs. And I also think it's really important right now, more so than ever. We've been tracking diverse supplier spend forever and a day. We've been talking about tracking and developing diverse recruiting programs, and really starting to understand the diverse candidates that are coming into programs. That's been a little bit more difficult, but now we're at a point where customers want it. Customers that aren't, that don't have something now are definitely talking about it, definitely have something in place for their full-time. So it's much more of a conversation now. So we really need to ensure that our suppliers are meeting that need and are coming to us with a program that is defined and well run, so that we can, really pair them with a customer where they're going to add that value.
Right. I mean, we're pivoting from using suppliers as a way to get minority spend to actually getting minority candidates from suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's great.
I mean, maybe just to jump and piggyback off that comment, right? It's moving from, what historically sometimes was a focus more on the compliance of, hey, we want to do this because maybe we have an OFCC, organizations might say, well, we have an OFCCP requirement to do certain things, to, hey, it's a genuine value add. This is delivering, this idea of a diverse workforce is delivering better performance. There's great research from the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, which is an institute at Syracuse University, around the value proposition for veterans, which I referred to earlier. Again, it's performance and retention, holding other factors constant, tends to be higher than non-veterans. And in certain skill areas, ones that we often talk about around leadership, team management, certainly more harder skills, or like a project management, veterans tend to over-index compared to others in the general population, again, holding other factors constant. And then another great one is the veteran population, great diversity word, it's an intersectional community, meaning the military reflects the diversity of the American society. So recruiting from the military allows recruitment for and bringing in a diverse workforce from the broader society. So for an MSP and for staffing companies to focus on that, it's a logical thing to do, because it's delivering greater value, ultimately to the end customer. And maybe one last reflection, Rachel, on your last comment, the idea of it should be meaningful to them. It shouldn't be a bolt-on for it to be really successful. Just saying, well, we do a focus on the veteran or the military community, and then there's sort of no substance there.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's some substance, but it's the total wrong one. Hey, you're
Right.
you're fishing where the fish are not. So often that can happen, right? So the fact that it's meaningful to them means that they're going to perform much better. It's not some sort of bolt-on. Is just tremendously important.
Agreed.
Great.
And I would add to that also is also to remember that, especially in regulated industries, we find that veterans make fantastic, whether they're full-time employees or through a labor provider. They get it. They understand what that means to be in a regulated industry where you could be privy to information that is not public, is highly confidential. So it's not uncommon to see those type of things here, especially in the banking. Healthcare is not far afield from us in that as well. So yeah, for us, veterans allow us a certain sense of safety, if you will, when you start looking at our risk profiles and what makes a good teammate, whether it is a full-time or a third-party hire. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a group of individuals that we find there to be great value in bringing them on board.
Great. And we've covered some of this, but the follow-on question is, what can staffing companies do to better position themselves to, get your attention, to better support your veteran hiring efforts? Adam, you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We're going to want to see how are you performing in that field? How are you recruiting? What are your submissions? What are the hirings? What is the hiring program and strategy and program goal? I mean, it can't just be a line in your RFP response or in your sales pitch of, oh, and we focus on veterans. I mean, since we also focus on veteran hires as a firm, we're going to kind of probe into that, and we're going to want to know, well, what is the ratio? How are you going and finding them? Is it a, hey, we put this out on Indeed and, oh, happens, you know, happy day, 6 veterans applied for the same position. Therefore, we can say we do, you know, veteran recruiting. Or are you going to military bases and are you doing recruiting? Are you doing upskilling? Are you actively, you know, working with the liaisons on the military side, understanding what groups of individuals are coming out and where do those skills play into the private sector? So, you know, we're going to dig in on that. So be prepared that when you say you can do veteran hiring, we're going to want to actually see the proof in the pudding and not just a, oh, when it happens, it's great, and we've been lucky over the last 3 months. I mean, we're going to want to see an honest program with KPAs and performance metrics because, again, in the bank, if it's not measured, it's not done.
Right.
Just to build off that, I completely agree with Adam's comments, and it's the programming that's not just on the upfront of the recruitment side of you know where to go to find that talent. It's after the hire. It's the
Right.
upskilling that Adam mentioned and the employee engagement as well, right there. Adam mentioned the importance of business resource groups or employee resource groups around building a community as well as supporting recruitment activities, which is very important to both our companies like a lot of others. Well, contingent workers are not employees. They can't participate in employee resource group activities. They can't form that sense of community, that camaraderie that we know is so important, disproportionately important for the veteran community, in particular the recently transitioned veteran community. So, you know, when we look at those, what are the programs that the staffing companies could potentially provide? It's not just the upfront, hey, we're going to give you greater candidates, but it's the entire life cycle of employment. It's keeping them engaged, it's upskilling them, giving that community. That's going to ensure the retention. So it'll show up later on in those KPAs, in particular around retention. But you know, just from an employee satisfaction, it's an important thing.
Right. And John, I think that's really important too, because if you're going to put together a world-class or even a functioning veteran recruiting strategy, you have to remember that veteran hires do require a different amount of upkeep first coming out of the military, because it is a culture shock to come out of a regimented society, and it is a society, as John and I will both tell you, when you're in the military, you are in the military. And Kyle, as you know, as a spouse, when your spouse is in the military, you too as a spouse are in the military, right? And spouses are always one grade higher than the other spouse who's in the military. So there's that to remember as well. But my point being is, especially with the BRGs in corporate America, look at how corporate America is doing it. I mean, John leads his, I'm a member of ours. And we need that ability to have other veterans shepherd other veterans through the, okay, you're no longer in the military. It's okay. We don't stand at parade rest. You know, we don't have to pop to when our superiors walk in, you know, because there are some ingrained cultures that are just hard to break. I still say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, you know, depending on who I'm talking to. And they're like, well, my name's, you know, John or Sam. I'm like, I get it. It's something you're probably never going to get out of me. But I think that's just a little bit of an allegory on, you know, you do have to help them understand the difference between the lifestyles.
Right. Great. All right, so let's launch our next question. So this one looks complex, but it's not. The answers are the same for everybody. Your options are the same, but the question is different depending on who you are. So if you are a staffing vendor or an MSP, what percentage of your customers or end accounts share their veteran hiring goals with you? And if you are a hiring company, what percentage of your vendors share their veteran hiring data with you? So same answers, different questions depending on who you are. Gather some responses here. We got a low response rate. Hopefully they're not confused by that. All right, I'm going to shut it down. I'll share the results. Some or none. Some or none. That's the result. To be expected, though. That's the as is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
So
it's
our
also
next
sometimes,
topic is the role of MSPs.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say sometimes it's hard to share what you don't know. So, you know, if you are developing, it's hard to share because you might not have something, and that's where, you know, we can lead into the next topic.
Great. So our next topic is about MSPs. What role do they play in accounting for veteran hiring within the supplier base? Most large companies or even medium-sized companies use a managed service provider to manage the staffing companies and all the contingent labor activity. So how can MSPs work with both end customer and the supplier base to achieve veteran hiring goals? So since Rachel is our MSP expert here, we'll have her lead off on that question.
Cool. Thanks, Kyle. And I think this is a really nice segue from kind of how we ended topic 2, because, you know, it all kind of plays in together. But it all starts with, you know, with collaborating. So collaborating, you know, with our customers, whether that's at the time of implementing an MSP, you know, right there, understanding what hiring goals are. Is the contingent, you know, staff going to play into that? You know, if not, you know, really understanding the corporate culture and what their full-time employee goals are, so that we can be, you know, sourcing and looking for those suppliers that are going to bring that same type of mindset and culture to the customer. So I think it's really just being the subject matter expert, being, you know, being collaborative. You know, the MSP generally comes in as, you know, the subject matter expert, you know, kind of in the contingent workforce. So really understanding, you know, where goals should be, you know, what goals should be depending on the industry, you know, how likely they are to meet them, you know, how to, you know, develop and come up with the, you know, your SLAs and your KPIs, and have everyone working to, you know, a single goal. So I think, you know, really important to, you know, all starts with understanding your customer, what we know from our customers, what we can, you know, we can flow down to our supplier partners. And again, as a vendor neutral MSP, our supplier partners are key. That they are, you know, the MSP is a subject matter in, you know, best practice, policies, procedures, but our staffing partners are the ones that are key to staffing. They're the subject matter expert in staffing. So really working with them, understanding the types of diverse recruiting programs they have in place. And again, you know, understanding that, you know, working with them to understand that they have meaningful programs in place, so that we can really understand what customers they're best to support to meet those, you know, those hiring goals. And, you know, as we're looking at suppliers and diverse suppliers, you know, having some of these conversations, you know, some of our suppliers might be interested in starting to put together a diverse, you know, recruiting initiative, and we want to help those. You know, we want to, you know, mentor them and make sure they get to a place where they do have a viable, diverse recruiting program. They are not just ticking a box, that they'll be able to show some substance. They know how to recruit diverse candidates and manage them. And when it comes to the veterans, you know, both Adam and John touched on this, really important that our suppliers know how to source them and manage them, because it is very different. And sometimes it's as much as us working with the customer to understand job descriptions, and not just work with a templated job description, which is bullet, 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 must, need, required, because sometimes those things are taken very literally, and, you know, it could be a turnoff, or, you know, to certain resources, you know, that are looking at this job description. And sometimes if it's a supplier that really doesn't necessarily understand how these have to be translated differently, you know, they're not going to be the best at sourcing those candidates. So really understanding that, if that, you know, understanding again, you know, that if we're going after the veterans, we need to make sure that our job descriptions, you know, reflect that. We need to understand that our suppliers that have these veteran sourcing programs are managing them and giving them the resources they need. You know, to John's point, you know, a contingent workforce or worker is extremely valuable to a client, but they're not an employee, so they can't offer the same benefits that they can to their full-time employees. So understanding like what we can, you know, take from what the customer is doing for their full-time employees, flowing that down to our suppliers, making sure they understand it, and they're able to manage their resources the same way so that they do have similar benefits, similar opportunities, you know, in similar places to go with questions and help and advice, you know, depending on that diverse classification. I think that's very important in just sourcing that most qualified candidate and retaining them.
When I think of,
Right.
just to build off of Rachel's comment, when I think of from the company that's you know, that's purchasing these services, the heart of supply management, right, what the procurement professionals are doing that manage this, should be fostering great relationships with their suppliers, right? They should be beneficial. There should be sharing of goal. There should very clearly be sharing of goals, and then sharing of best practices, right? J&J is successful when our suppliers are also successful. That's how we're going to ultimately get the best innovation, the best goods and services. So when it comes to contingent labor, sharing, here are our best practices. Here are the industry organizations that we're participating in that we think are best in class. There's value to that, to J&J. You know, I mentioned we're partners with Hiring Our Heroes. Well, which is a great organization, nonprofit organization run through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Well, there's value to J&J when other organizations also join that, right? And when our suppliers are doing things to improve their performance, that's better. So, you know, including in top-to-top meetings or in other, you know, other meetings around performance and development of the organization, you know, talking about this should be part of it, especially when it's coming to labor practices. You know, just one other thought, building off of Rachel's comments around job description inclusivity. It's such an important thing. It ends up being a niche topic when it comes just to the veteran population, because you're only talking about, you know, 6.5% or so of the U.S. population, but tremendously important to go and share, hey, here's how J&J is working on job description inclusivity, and here's potential things to include or to consider with our you know, contingent labor postings. That's an important thing to do. There's really no downside to doing that type of information sharing, right? It just makes everybody perform better, be more satisfied, and frankly, it's even less confusing. You know, if you think of you're the hiring manager who maybe going the route of, I'm going to bring an employee in, so I'm going to need to create a job description for that, or my need is not such that I need an employee, but I could take a contingent worker for some period of time on a distinct project. That experience for that individual should be relatively similar as they think about the type of requirements that they have. So something like job description inclusivity is a great one. Why should there be really different ones from a baseline of things to consider? There really doesn't need to be. It's just, it all goes back to sharing best practices, which should be the heart of really good supplier management program anyway, around supplier development and engagement.
Agreed.
You know, and I would add on all of this too, is I think this is the important conversation to be having now, because I think in 4 to 5 years, this could be the gotcha conversation, right? As we start looking at what the current administration is doing, reading articles on minimum wage increases, when you start thinking about litigation that was coming out pre-pandemic, so we're talking Prop 85 in California, the co-employment discussions that we were having due to the Uber and the DoorDash employment issues, what defines an employee is going to change. And honestly, with this age of the pandemic, we've already started seeing that definition start to get blurred, right? And pre-pandemic, I think it would be anybody who studied labor can say an employee is clearly somebody who is badged with that firm's badge and label. They have an employee ID and they can get in and out of the building. Pretty straightforward. Well, now an employee can be anywhere, right? And in the banking sector, we have 90% of our workforce now federated, which is an unbelievable move from an employee standpoint, right? And so everything that I am reading and studying on and trying to stay abreast in demonstrates that contingent labor, ICs, and 1099s are going to do nothing but increase. W-2s are actually going to be on the minority. 1099s are going to be the majority of your workforce. So I think it's important for all of our labor providers to take these webinars seriously, listen to what we're saying as corporates, listen to what we're saying as MSPs, because we're going to come to you to fit these solutions. I think Rachel said it real well. Know your customer. Know what they're going through. Know how they're defining things. Understand where they're going to try to be in 5 years. Get yourself positioned now because it's going to be a quick turn when that turn happens, and we're going to be looking for the partners that can turn and flex with us as quickly. So a lot more to come. You know, John and I still kind of suffer a little bit from the old school of you're 1099, we're a W-2, and we're going to draw a very comfortable line right here. I think Rachel sees it probably more than we do of, yeah, but that line's getting really narrow and really blurry in a lot of the mid-sized firms, and what happens in the mid-market then happens in the top market. So I think we all need to kind of listen to this cautionary tale, understand where everybody is, and realize that this is a conversation that's going to expand and needs to expand as we continue on, especially as we come out of this pandemic and we start doing true economic recovery. This is going to take even a more front row in our conversations on labor strategy and move forwards.
Right, and large companies like J&J or Truist typically have a RFP for their MSP or for to become a staffing company. They send that RFP out, and really this flows down from John and Adam. You are the experts in this space. You're going to define these requirements and give that to procurement, which will then all the suppliers will respond to that. So as those things happen, you know, circle the wagons and really bring this to the forefront because it's important.
Yep.
So we do have some questions here. First question is, and I think we've talked on it this a little bit, is are there any particular jobs or skill sets where your corporation prefers a veteran candidate?
You know, I think that's an interesting question. I wouldn't say prefers,
You know, in the
but
regulatory
boy,
space.
yeah, I was about to say, I wouldn't say prefers, but boy, we sure do like it. And that's in cybersecurity. Yeah, the United States Army's cybersecurity teams is probably the best in the world. So when you take a look at cyber attacks, the U.S. military leads all industries, if you consider them an industry, in attacks. So the counterterrorism and counter cyber squads that the U.S. military has put together, the ladies and men that are coming out of those programs are bar none the best and brightest in their field. And so we do look for people coming out with military credentials, especially in the roles of cybersecurity and anti or counterattacks as well too. So that's probably, I would say, again, not a requirement, but we definitely look there.
Well, just to build on the cybersecurity comment, what I will say is the J&J Chief Information Security Officer is Maureen Allison. She's a United States Military Academy grad, one of the first women to graduate from the military academy, and certainly she's doing incredible work there. So one anecdotal point on that, you know, to directly answer the question, I would say veterans can go in so many different areas. Really, they can go in any area and be successful, right? The military trains individuals who are, you know, medical doctors, just like it trains logisticians, just like it trains Navy surface warfare officers. And the idea of, you know, they can transfer their function and their industry because they have underlying skills and competencies around leadership, team management, project management, learning agility that allows them to be successful anywhere is what's so important. Are there certain instances where individuals may say, I was trained to do one thing in the military at a very, very specific technical skill set, and I want to go do that next thing in the civilian world, and they're going to be great, and it's directly transferable, even the technical skill set, that's great. You know, right? It's the stereotype example that's often given of the person was a truck driver in the military, they want to go be a truck driver in the civilian world, give them their commercial driver's license, they can go do it and be successful. They have all of the technical knowledge needed on day one, is sort of the example that's often given. And that is true in some cases, but I usually, you know, I'd like to re-steer a little bit from that thinking to just say, listen, there are skills and competencies that are required in all different functional areas, in all different role types.
Yep.
That's the thing that we talk about internally to J&J.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're looking for a PhD level researcher or the person who's at the distribution center or the manufacturing line operator or the financial analyst or the project manager, you should be able to go get that from the veteran population and be tremendously successful in that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Oh, sorry, Rachel, go right ahead.
I was saying Absolutely agreed. But I think that's where it becomes key to really knowing your customer, knowing your candidate, understanding the skills that are transferable. That if something doesn't say, exactly in the experience, understanding how it transfers to the job. I have been very successful, in roles that are heavy with policy and procedure. I find that veteran candidates are fantastic in those roles because they've just come out of that environment. But I think it's really understanding how to translate the skills to the job.
Yeah, and and I also want to say to other veterans out there, I was light infantry. Don't think that because you were a forward-facing personnel, right? I mean, I've never been asked to clear a saw gun while I've been in the bank or lead a patrol. But I'll tell you this: the gentleman that provides personal security to our bank president is ex-Special Forces. So, there are positions, even in the bank, where us ex-gunslingers are still needed. So don't think that, oh, well, my skill doesn't translate. Oh, it most definitely translates. And there are some industries that are looking for you. So, yeah, I just want to add that.
No, and I think that's a great example, right? I'll use another Johnson & Johnson example of a senior leader. The Johnson & Johnson CEO, Alex Gorski, is a former United States Military Academy grad, Ranger School graduate, number of years on active duty, and then transitioned over. But again, from a combat arms branch,
right,
where, that focus area. Well, then he joined in life sciences sales roles, and then had a number of roles in a very successful career inside Johnson & Johnson and elsewhere, and now is the CEO of the company, right? But again, it's that his role in the military was not leading a Fortune 100 level life sciences company.
Right.
Yet he was able to go because those skills are transferable to go and be successful throughout the career.
Most definitely.
All right. So another question is, do you weight a veteran that's not really a veteran, someone who's in transition versus someone who's been in civilian life for a while? Do you weight those candidates differently? Do you target them differently? Or do you kind of treat them all the same as far as the types of veterans you target?
So from our standpoint, we treat them just the same, right? One that has just freshly transferred out or transitioned into the private sector versus one that has been doing it for a while is equally as valuable to us. Both have their the yin and the yang of why we would hire them, but it comes down to cultural fit too. We train all of our hiring managers on that too, is to understand, do they have the right personality and kind of mindset to be part of the bank and be a successful teammate inside the bank. So I would say that there is really no weighting for us when it comes to hiring.
Yeah, I agree with that. What I would say is different is how you reach them, because they're at different phases professionally. So the way they approach the market assessment and who should I go work with, what type of industry, looks different when you're 1 year before transition from active duty than it does 6 months before, than it does 1 year after. So what does that mean in practice, right? Certain partner organizations that we work with might be really focused on that 12 months before transition from active duty military service to to civilian employment, assuming they're going to civilian employment, creating a skill bridge program which is essentially can be thought of as a government funded externship for that last 6 months or in the window of the last 6 months of their active duty time, right? Creating that program lets you target that group, and that looks different than, right, if some organization were to focus on how to recruit people like myself in my transition of going to a full-time graduate program, right? So how do you target veterans that are in that phase at the that transition to university recruitment and then are coming in is different than if someone were to target recruiting me now as somebody who's essentially 10 years removed from military service. So I think it's more, think of it that way, of how on the recruitment side in particular, you need different channels, different programs, different tools and messaging to attract talent in particular.
yeah, you're definitely going to have a different sourcing strategy for each of those people on post. Obviously, you're going to really work with on post TAPS programs to target those candidates, but you know, people that have been in civilian life for a while, you're going to have a different strategy to target them as well.
And maybe
Great.
just one other thought on that
So
would be, which we didn't mention.
We're running out of time here. We do have some other.
Oh, Kyle, I'll just finish quickly on one other group.
Go
we
ahead,
didn't
John,
talk about.
sorry.
The veteran, the person who was an active duty service member and is now a member of the National Guard and Reserve component, right? The part-time military and full-time employee, right? Thinking about segmenting out your sourcing activities, right? How do you recruit? How do you attract that candidate to what are the benefits? What are the programming, right? That person's needs will look differently than someone who, hey, I was in the military a decade ago. I was in the military 20 years ago, right? So it is thinking about those distinct groups. And I think that that group in particular is worth a call out because their value proposition, their needs, the benefits in particular will just look different.
Great. All right. So we'll have other questions that we'll send to the panelists later on, and we'll share those broadly when we get those answers. Since I really appreciate everyone's patience in dealing with my technical difficulties here, I'm going to hand things back over to Erica to give us some closing remarks. You there, Erica?
I am. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to all our amazing panelists for discussing today's importance of corporations, MSPs, and contingent staffing suppliers working together to improve veteran hiring outcomes. Certainly, I'm sure the audience and we all have gained useful information to consider as we develop our own internal programs. Please note that we will be sharing the video of the webinar along with the attendees and sending a follow-up survey. We will post poll results and key takeaways to our LinkedIn profile. We encourage you to please stay connected with us on LinkedIn as we will continue our webinar series. If you'd like to submit any questions or topic suggestions, we welcome you to send us an email at webinars@iic.com. With that, I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Please stay well and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.